Good morning.
Good morning, Tina. How are you?
I am good. Did everybody take their canoe to work today?
Almost. I considered it.
Oh my gosh, it is. It's still going.
Yes, it is still raining. I cannot believe it, but at least, I mean, the most of the roads at this point have been cleared out. Some have been hit harder than others, but thankfully they've been really good about that and clearing the roads and getting everything underway. So it could, and I'm knocking on wood right now, the table we have everything on is made of wood, be worse. So I'm unjinxing it as I say.
Yes, at least Henri, kind of shifted to the east and just dumped some water. But speaking of water and flooding and closed streets and power outages, I'm going to talk today about the intersection of quality of life issues in the suburbs and the need of industrial and commercial entities in the county, and how the two just have to coexist. If you recall, last week I touched briefly on a company in Orangeburg in a corporate park expanding by the name of Sheffman. And what I didn't get a chance to say was that while Sheffman is moving forward in doubling its building to 100,000 square feet in a corporate park, even in a case like that company, before the planning board, had to negotiate with its neighbors to agree to limit its hours of operation down to 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. To 8:30 a.m. to 6 o'clock p.m. because of the truck noise disturbing the residential neighborhood, which is right behind its facility. You wouldn't know it until you get behind the trees, but and in fact that neighborhood is in New Jersey. So it's interesting that that was negotiated, and I guess those residents have some relief, and at the same time, the commercial entity has had to scale back its operations. Now, last week we reported on a lawsuit here in Upper Nyack. The North River Shipyard in Upper Nyack is suing the village of Upper Nyack for $8 million. $8 million.
Oh, wow.
$3 million for compensation and $5 million for punitive damages, claiming that the village passed a noise ordinance in retaliation for the shipyard installing a large crane on a barge just outside of the village's zoning authority. So the village claims that it passed a comprehensive noise ordinance to protect the local residents' quality of life, but North River, the plaintiff in the case, says it's the only operation of its kind in the village, probably actually the only operation of its kind along the Rockland shore, and it is the only business adversely affected by this so-called noise ordinance. That is, that it was targeted by the village and singled out in retaliation. The case was originally filed in Rockland County Supreme Court and was recently moved to the federal court in White Plains. And we will have to watch this case because, the reason actually that it went to federal court rather than the county court is that the plaintiff says that the village violated constitutional rights to due process and free speech. And like I said, we're going to have to watch this one because it's an interesting case. The shipyard has been in operation since the 1700s, but it did change its functioning when the new bridge was built, and I guess that created a new kind of industrial situation. But it was interesting when we posted this particular story online and on social media. It was very interesting to see how many people, and Facebook is a free-for-all, but how many people came to voice their support for the North River Shipyard itself. And in this case, this was not one of these situations where it was sort of residents against a commercial entity. So that's just an interesting aside. And just finally, we've also recently reported that a 220,000 square foot warehouse fulfillment center is being planned just off Route 303 in Valley Cottage. And it's only been to the technical committee so far, but if that application moves on to the planning and zoning boards, there's no doubt that application is going to be the target of a lot of, I would say, I don't know about controversy, but I think that many issues will be raised, again, around the issue of diesel pollution and traffic and definitely noise of its planned 24/7 operation. So it's a very tough balancing act. Here in the county, I think this county is very small, it's very packed, and residents, move here because they want quiet and peace and a quality of life. But we're never far from something that is commercial or industrial, and so, planning boards and zoning boards have a very big task to balance the needs of everybody. So we're going to keep a pin in that lawsuit and see how that plays out. But it's an interesting one.
That is for certain. I mean, now that it appears that more and more, at least from what we're seeing, this increased industrial environment is being created and moved up here. So I personally, from what I've seen thus far, and from what you're conveying, I feel as though they might have a lot of pushback from civilians, at least in the town, and residents that would like to keep the county at least as peaceful as possible. So that's certainly one thing. I'm very surprised that they now let me see if I got this right. The residents came to the defense of, and this is the other this is the court case you're referring to, came to the defense of the company that put this crane in that is being sued for the noise.
So let me I'll give it to you one more time. So it's actually the company itself, the shipyard itself, that's suing the village of Upper Nyack for its what they call its unfair noise ordinance. And what I saw play out on social media, which surprised me, just because of typically what you see is it's kind of a David versus Goliath mentality. So many people will often rail against the industrial entity that, let's say, is allegedly creating the whatever it is, the pollution, the noise, the nuisance. But in this case, and I don't know if it's an affection for the river, if there's an understanding that this is essentially a company that's, or at least its predecessors, that have been around for 200 years, and it's kind of the fabric. I don't really know exactly what the animus was, but the main response, it seems, on the Facebook page that was most specific to Upper Nyack was, I hope the North River Shipyard wins. And so essentially, they were showing and this is just Facebook, and it's just a snapshot, and it doesn't mean anything, and it doesn't say that the shipyard is in its right or that the village will prevail. I was just commenting that very often when for example, when decisions are made like the Chefman having to scale back its hours, it's because residents have come forward and expressed their concerns, displeasure, or anger. In this case, it's hard to know. It was just interesting to observe that the sympathy came down on the side of the shipyard, and I had noticed many people say, I hope they win. I hope they win the case against the village. Now, those comments may not have been from people in the village who might hope that the village will prevail. But it was just it's an interesting lawsuit as it is, because it's one of those things where you have an entity that feels like it's been singled out.
Right.
We had a similar thing that was going on here for quite a while with the Palisades Center not being able to expand into unused space that it had for 20 years. You have to read up on that, Will. But one of the things about that was that in the long, protracted lawsuit, the Palisades Center also was saying that no other entity had been treated like that in the town of Clarkstown. So this is similar here, where the North River Shipyard is saying, nobody else has been treated like this in the village of Upper Nyack. Although I don't know that there is any commercial entity that's comparable. There probably isn't. They make one case in the lawsuit, which I just found kind of interesting, which is that they compare the noise to to lawn equipment. Landscaping equipment, which is also just something that gets bandied about and bantered about constantly on Facebook. The whole noise issue. So this is the thing about suburbia, is we move here for peace and quiet, but it's in some regards we have to put up with noise that can be just as grating as if we lived in cities or larger places. So it's interesting. We will watch this one. It's an interesting lawsuit.
Right. It's very true that is a common complaint. That complaint of being singled out is usually you'd find that complaint in a lot of lawsuits when it comes to corporate retaliation, at least to previous problems, or at least inquiries, perhaps a reverse of a lawsuit. Just trying to get back at whoever is quote unquote singling them out, which is usually not the case, but they just happen to be creating an issue that needs to be fixed realistically, and we shall definitely endeavor to see how that plays out. I'm certainly interested as well, and of course I can certainly empathize with people. The position where I live in Newburgh is very close together, so there's a lot of noise that gets carried over into a lot of other people's areas where they currently reside. So it's definitely I understand the sentiment where the civilians and the residents are certainly coming from when it comes to that. But yeah, that's quite interesting, and we shall endeavor to see what happens with those. But
all right. Well, that's great. And in the meantime, folks can go on to rcbizjournal.com and sign up for a free daily newsletter.
Indeed. Can they reach you anywhere else if they
have something they want to tell me? It's ttraster, TTRASTER @rcbizjournal.com. Send on over your thoughts, comments, story proposals, or anything else you want to tell me. Oh, and the compliments at what a good job we do.
Yes, and what a wonderful job, and we do thank you so very much for coming on and talking about this. This is always interesting, and it's good to know what's happening in your county at this time, and those are some very pertinent lawsuits that are showing, so we'll see what goes on with them. But thank you again, Tina Traster.
Have a great day and a